Baba-Yaga. The name stirs unease, echoing through generations of Russian folklore, like a whispered warning carried by the wind. She is not a simple witch, not merely a creature of the dark woods. Baba-Yaga is something older, stranger, an entity whose roots sink deep into the soil of Slavic myth, where boundaries blur between the living and the dead, the natural and the supernatural. For centuries, she has haunted the imagination of Eastern Europe. Her figure both grotesque and commanding. She is the crone in the forest, the eater of children, the test of heroes, the embodiment of death and rebirth itself. To encounter her is to be forever changed. That is, if one is fortunate enough to escape alive. The origins of Baba-Yaga are as murky as the swamp she is said to inhabit. The earliest written accounts appear in Russian folktales collected in the 16th and 17th centuries, though her essence may be far older, tied to pre-Christian Slavic pagan traditions. Some scholars suggest she may have once been a goddess of death, fertility, and the natural cycle, transformed over time into a monstrous witch as Christianity spread and demonized the old ways. Her name itself resists easy explanation. Baba is a Slavic word for an old woman or grandmother. Yaga, however, is trickier. Some linguists link it to meaning horror, disease, or even wickedness. Others connect it to the root for serpents or snakes, reinforcing her image as something reptilian, primal, and even venomous. Thus, Baba-Yaga embodies contradiction. She is a grandmother, yet she is not nurturing. She is wise, yet cruel. And she is human, yet distinctly other. In most tales, Baba-Yaga is described as a frail but terrifying old woman, her body twisted by age and darkness. Her nose is long and hooked, sometimes said to be made of iron. Her teeth are sharp, often yellowed, and sometimes described as fangs. Her hair is stringy and wild, her eyes sunken yet glowing with unnatural fire. But unlike ordinary witches of Western folklore, Baba-Yaga is not simply defined by her frailty. She is both weak and impossibly strong. Some stories say she can stretch her limbs across entire rooms, or that her breath is enough to extinguish fire itself. She is often described as skeletal, her skin paper-thin, sagging over bones, her form more corpse-like than living. What makes Baba-Yaga most infamous, however, is not her appearance, but her dwelling. Deep within the Russian forest, beyond the safety of villages and the reach of roads, stands her house. But this is no ordinary hut. It is perched upon giant chicken legs, massive talons that scratch the ground, shifting and turning the house as if it were alive. The hut can move, rotate, and even walk through the forest, making it impossible for ordinary travelers to find, unless she wills it. Its windows glow like eyes. Its door requires a secret phrase to open. Hut, hut, turn your back to the forest, your front to me. Only then does the creaking door swing wide, revealing the threshold to Baba-Yaga's domain. Around the hut, a fence of human bones rise from the earth. Skulls line the top like lanterns, some with burning candles glowing within their hollowed sockets. These skulls are said to be the remains of her victims, a warning to all who dare approach. At times, the fence is incomplete, gaps waiting to be filled with the skulls of those who are still yet to come. Inside, the air reeks of smoke, herbs, and decay. The hearth burns constantly, and Baba-Yaga often lies stretched across it, her bony legs extending into the corners of the room, sometimes said to reach wall to wall. She gnaws on bones, stirs cauldrons, and mutters incantations in a language forgotten by man. Her pestle and mortar are always nearby, for this is her chosen mode of travel. Baba-Yaga soars across the sky in a giant mortar, steering it with a pestle and sweeping away her tracks with a broom made of silver birch. To see her flying is to witness a nightmare, gliding over the treetops, her cackle mingling with the wind. Yet Baba-Yaga is not always a simple villain. She is unpredictable. Sometimes she devours those who stumble upon her, boiling children alive in her cauldron and feasting on their flesh. Other times she aids lost travelers or heroes, granting them advice, magical objects, or even knowledge, though only after they prove themselves through wit, bravery, or endurance. In this way, she is both destroyer and guide, predator and teacher. She is a liminal figure, standing between life and death. One of the most famous tales involving Baba-Yaga is that of Vasilisa the Beautiful. Vasilisa was a young girl whose cruel stepmother sent her into the forest to fetch light from Baba-Yaga. Armed only with a magical doll her late mother had given her, Vasilisa journeyed into the dark woods. There she found Baba-Yaga's terrible hut, the bone fence glowing in the moonlight. Inside, Baba-Yaga gave Vasilisa impossible tasks, sorting grains, spinning thread, cleaning the hut, all while threatening to eat her if she failed. With the help of her doll, Vasilisa succeeded, and Baba-Yaga begrudgingly rewarded her with a skull lantern filled with fire. When Vasilisa brought it home, the skull's flames consumed her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, leaving only ashes. In this story, Baba-Yaga is both monster and liberator, horrifying yet ultimately serving justice. Other tales cast her as a test for young men, warriors, or princes. Those who show respect, courage, and cleverness may gain her aid, while those who falter become bones in her fence. In many ways, she is less a simple witch and more a force of nature, like the forest itself, which can shelter or destroy, feed or consume. Scholars have long debated what Baba-Yaga truly represents. Some see her as a remnant of the old Slavic death goddess, her hut a symbolic coffin, with its chicken legs recalling the stilts used to keep ancient burial chambers above the ground. Her fence of bones and skull lanterns align with imagery of the underworld, suggesting that her home is not merely in the forest, but at the threshold of life and death. Others see her as a fertility figure, tied to cycles of destruction and rebirth. She devours, but she also transforms. To pass through her trials is to emerge changed, stronger, and more alive. For children, Baba-Yaga is a warning not to stray too far into the woods, where wolves and worse may lurk. For adults, she embodies the fear of death, of the unknown, of powers beyond human control. But she also embodies resilience, reminding us that survival requires cunning, humility, and strength. Baba-Yaga's influence has endured well beyond folklore. She appears in literature, film, and even video games, her imagery resonating across cultures. In some modern depictions, she is softened into a quirky old witch. In others, she remains a terrifying cannibalistic monster. The Marvel Universe, John Wick's Russian enemies, and even children's cartoons have borrowed her name and imagery. Yet at her core, she remains what she has always been: a mystery, a contradiction, a figure that refuses to be pinned down as good or evil. What makes Baba-Yaga so unsettling is not just her cruelty or her appetite for flesh, but her unpredictability. She does not exist within the neat moral lines of fairy tales, where witches are always bad and heroes are always good. Instead, she embodies the raw, chaotic truth of nature itself. The forest does not care for morality. It provides food, but it also hides predators. It gives shelter, but it also swallows travelers whole. Baba-Yaga is that truth given form, wild, ancient, untamable. To hear her name is to be drawn into an ancient fear, one older than Christianity, older than folklore itself. The fear of the dark woods, the unknown, and the devouring mother who both creates and destroys. She is a witch, a goddess, a mother, a monster, and a teacher. She is ba-Yaga, and she will never be forgotten. In the dark recesses of Russian folklore, where forests creak with secrets and the wind carries whispers from the other world, there exists a being both dreaded and fascinating. She is known as Kikimora, a household spirit, a shadow at the edge of firelight, a presence that creeps between the walls of old cottages and makes herself known in the dead of night. To some, she is a mere trickster. To others, she is the herald of death. And for those who have felt her fingers brush against their skin while they lay paralyzed in bed, Kikimora is a nightmare made flesh. Legends describe Kikimora in many forms, each stranger than the last. Sometimes she appears as a gaunt, skeletal woman, her tangled hair like withered reeds, her eyes dark hollows that swallow light. Other tales claim she is no taller than a child, hunched and twisted, her long nose hooked downward, her teeth sharp as needles. At times she has the legs of a chicken or the body of a shriveled bird, as if she was never meant to fully belong to the human world. Yet in every telling she embodies unease. She is not a radiant spirit, not a guardian or guide. She is a reminder that even within one's home, safety is never guaranteed. Kikimora is often tied to the house itself, much like her male counterpart, the domovoi. But while the domovoi is a protector, a spirit who ensures prosperity and order if treated with respect, Kikimora is an opposite, the disruptive force. She lurks in the corners of the house, and the space between the stove or behind the wooden beams, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Her presence is marked by subtle signs, a sudden creak of the floorboards when no one is moving, the faint sound of scratching in the walls, the rustling of cloth in the night. The dog might growl into the darkness. The family dog might growl into the darkness, sensing what human eyes cannot. And if you hear the faint ticking sound of needles clicking, like someone weaving thread in the silence, beware. Kikimora is near, spinning her endless cloth. But what does she spin? Folklore says she weaves the threads of human fate. A family who hears her busy at night may awaken to prosperity with strong crops and healthy children, but if the weaving ceases abruptly, it is a dire omen. Sickness, famine, or death is soon to follow. In this way, Kikimora is not only a nuisance, but a harbinger of what is to come. Every tug of her thread pulls at the strings of human lives. The most terrifying stories describe her nightly visits. She is said to slip into the bedroom when all are asleep, crawling up onto the bed. Her bony weight pressure against the chest of her victim. The sleeper awakens but cannot move, their breath shallow, their limbs heavy, their eyes wide open in the darkness. They see her perched on them, staring with unblinking eyes, her long fingers tightening around their throat. This, of course, mirrors what we now know as sleep paralysis, but to those who lived centuries ago in the cold villages of Russia, it was not a medical condition. It was Kikimora herself, stealing their breath, feeding on their fear, and if the victim survived until dawn, they would rise trembling, certain that death had only just been kept at bay. Farmers dreaded her touch as much as those within the household. It was said Kikimora could sour milk, kill chickens, and cause horses to grow weak overnight. If she took offense to a family, she might tangle the hair of livestock into impossible knots, or spoil a loom of fabric before it was finished. Her wrath was particularly feared by women, for she would target them the most often, appearing to idle spinsters, widows, or unkind mothers, punishing them with sleepless nights and terrifying visions. But Kikimora was not always malicious for the sake of cruelty. Some people believed her presence was a punishment, earned. A house not kept in order, a family that ignored traditional rituals, or a woman who neglected her domestic duties might draw Kikimora into the home. In this way, she was both a cautionary tale and a weapon of cultural expectation, reminding women of the importance of cleanliness, industry, and obedience. A clean home, it was said, might keep Kikimora away, but once she had settled into a place, she was nearly impossible to banish. To ward her off, families employed strange and desperate methods. The sign of the cross carved above the door, a broom laid upside down behind the threshold. Some households even placed sharp objects, knives, needles, or even scissors, into hidden corners, for spirits were believed to fear iron and steel. If Kikimora came to spin her threads in the night, these wards might distract or even deter her, keeping her weaving harmless. But more often than not, people simply endured her presence, listening uneasily to her nocturnal activities, hoping that her spinning would continue, that the threads of fate would not be cut. There are stories, too, that Kikimora can be tied to tragedy at birth. Some tales say that she is the restless spirit of a stillborn child, a twisted reflection of a life never lived, doomed to linger between worlds. Others claim she is born from the union of a domovoi and a human woman, or even from the soul of a cursed girl who died before marriage. These origins emphasize her liminality, never fully human, never fully spirit, always something unnatural. She is an intruder in the domestic sphere, a reminder that even the sanctuary of family life cannot escape the intrusion of death and sorrow. In Russian villages, the line between superstition and daily life blurred, and Kikimora thrived in that liminal space. When a child fell mysteriously ill, when crops failed for no clear reason, or when the sleep paralysis left a man gasping in bed, and with that belief came fear. Imagine living in a small wooden hut during the endless Russian winters of old, the fire dimming to embers, every creak amplified in the silence, a scratching sound in the rafters, a faint rustle by the stove, the sound of thread being pulled, taut, and deliberate. Was it mice? The wind? Or was it Kikimora, working her loom, shaping your fate even as you huddled in fear? Not all stories, however, paint her as wholly evil. Some suggest that she can be appeased, her wrath transformed into aid. If a woman showed diligence in her spinning and weaving, Kikimora might assist her in secret, helping complete the fabric overnight. If a family respected her presence and avoided offending her, she might act as a strange, invisible housekeeper, scaring off thieves or rodents. This duality makes her even more terrifying, for one never knew which Kikimora might appear, the silent helper or the suffocating hag crouched on your chest. The image of Kikimora endured not only in folklore, but in art and literature. Russian writers of the 19th century often referenced her, and even today she appears in modern horror fiction, video games, and films alike. Yet despite the adaptations, the core of her legend remains the same. Kikimora is fear embodied within the walls of the home, an unseen presence that disrupts the comfort of the hearth. She is the sound that wakes you at midnight, the pressure on your chest when you cannot move, the shadow that lingers in the corner of your eye. So tonight, when you turn off the lights and settle into bed, remember the old stories. And if you wake in the night, unable to move, a weight pressing down on your chest, and you hear the faint sound of thread being spun beside your ear, do not open your eyes. Do not look. For if you see her perched there, staring at you with her hollow eyes, you may not see the morning light again. In the vast landscape of Russian folklore, few figures evoke as much fear and fascination as the Upyr. Whispered about in tales that stretch back centuries, this creature represents more than just superstition. It embodies the fear of the grave, the terror of restless spirits, and the belief that the dead do not always remain buried. Long before Bram Stoker's Dracula emerged from Western literature, Slavic peasants were already warning one another about the dangers of the Upyr. To them, it was not a metaphor or a story to pass the time. It was a real thing lurking in the night, waiting to feed. The origins of the Upyr are ancient, possibly predating Christianity's arrival in Eastern Europe. In these early pagan times, the boundaries between the living and the dead were considered fragile. The Slavs believed that improper burial rites, violent deaths, or spiritual corruption could tether a soul to the mortal world. Those unlucky enough to be caught in this limbo did not pass on peacefully. Instead, they transformed into the Upyr, a creature cursed to wander, feeding on the vitality of the living. It was not just the body that animated, it was the hunger, the need to consume, that defined them. Descriptions of the Upyr vary across regions and eras, but certain traits remain consistent. Unlike the elegant vampires of modern fiction, the Upyr was often grotesque. In some accounts it appeared bloated and ruddy, its face twisted and swollen as if filled with blood. Its nails grew long and sharp, its teeth jagged, designed to tear flesh. In other stories, it could blend in with humans during the day, walking among villages unnoticed, only to shed its mortal disguise when night fell. It would then creep into homes, drain livestock, and feast upon unsuspecting families. Unlike Western vampires, which often focused on drinking blood, the Upyr was sometimes said to consume flesh as well. It was less about sophistication and more about raw hunger, closer to a corpse ghoul than a seducer. This grotesque image of the Upyr reflects the raw anxieties of rural Slavic life. For communities plagued by famine, disease, and unexplained deaths, the idea of a corpse rising to devour the living was not a flight of fancy, it was an explanation. It gave shape to the terror that lingered in the dark corners of their very own existence. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Upyr was its association with children. In some stories, it was particularly drawn to the young, creeping into cradles and sucking the life from infants as they slept. Mothers would keep watch at night, crossing their children with holy signs or placing protective charms near the bed to ward off the creature. This fear was not without reason. Infant mortality was tragically common in old Russia. When a child suddenly passed in the night with no clear explanation, the blame often fell upon the Upyr. It was easier to imagine a monster lurking in the shadows than to face the silent cruelty of illness. The Upyr was not only feared for its appetite, but also for its resilience. Killing one was no simple task. Folklore describes elaborate rituals designed to ensure that the creature stayed in the ground. Corpses suspected of being Upyrs were exhumed and inspected. If the body looked too fresh, if the nails appeared to have grown, or if blood was found at the mouth, villagers believed the corpse had risen at night. The response was brutal but necessary in their eyes. Stakes driven through the heart, decapitations, and even burning the body to ash. These grisly rituals were not acts of cruelty, but of survival, performed with trembling hands and desperate prayers. Christianity, when it spread through the Slavic lands, did not erase the fear of the Upyr, but rather reshaped it. The church framed the creature as a demonic force, a manifestation of evil itself, sometimes even associating it with heresy or witchcraft. Those who had lived sinful lives, those who had rejected the church, were said to be at risk of becoming Upyrs themselves after death. This merging of pagan and Christian beliefs reinforced the monster's presence in cultural memory. It was not merely a tale told to frighten children, but a religious warning, a moral lesson etched in fear. What is fascinating about this creature is how it reveals the deep cultural anxieties of the time. In an age without modern medicine, sudden death was a constant presence. Plagues swept through villages, crops failed, and entire families could perish in the span of a season. The Upyr was both a cause and a symbol of these tragedies. It represented the inexplicable, the unfairness of mortality, the lingering dread that even the grave offered no safety. By imagining a creature that preyed upon them, the Slavs externalized their suffering. They turned their pain into a monster with a face. The Upyr also played a role in burial customs at the time. Graves were dug carefully, often outside the main village, to prevent the dead from disturbing the living. Some communities would bury their dead face down, so that if the corpse tried to dig its own way out, it would only go deeper into the earth. Others placed stones or heavy objects on top of the grave to weigh the body down. In extreme cases, those suspected were buried at crossroads so that if they rose, they would wander endlessly, confused and unable to find their way back. Each of these practices reflects the same fear, that death was not an ending, but a transformation, and that vigilance was the only defense. Legends of the Upyr spread far beyond Russia. As Slavic peoples migrated and shared their stories, the concept of the blood-drinking undead seeped into broader European folklore. In some ways, the Upyr is the ancestor of the modern vampire, predating the redefined figures of Gothic literature. The link is clear in the etymology. Words like Upyr in Polish, vampir in Serbian, and eventually vampire in Western Europe all trace their lineage back to these ancient fears. But unlike Dracula, who is often romanticized, the Upyr retains a more primal horror. It is not charming, not noble, but raw hunger wrapped in human skin. Stories of this creature often carried warnings. Travelers were told not to wander alone at night. Families were cautioned to keep candles burning, to recite prayers before bed, to honor their dead with proper rituals. Even the suspicion of Upyr activity could plunge a village into paranoia. Neighbors might accuse one another, graves would be dug up, and unrest spread like wildfire. It is chilling to imagine these nights, lanterns swaying in the dark, shovels striking the earth, and villagers trembling as they unearthed the corpse of someone they once knew, desperate to prove or disprove that their loved one had returned as a monster. Yet the Upyr was not always depicted as mindless. In some accounts, it retained intelligence and could even pass for human. These stories describe it as a predator in disguise, capable of conversation, capable of trickery. It might even charm its way into a home, only to strike when its victim was vulnerable. This duality, sometimes beast and sometimes deceiver, makes the Upyr even more terrifying. It was not just a mindless corpse clawing its way from the grave. It could be your very own neighbor, your friend, even someone you trusted, hiding a monstrous hunger beneath the surface. So the next time you hear a story of vampires, remember this older, darker ancestor. Forget the noble count in his castle. Forget the romanticized predator of modern fiction. Think instead of the bloated corpse clawing at its coffin. The thing that creeps into a cradle, the restless dead that cannot be tamed. That is the Upyr, and it waits, as it always has, in the uneasy space between the living and the dead.